Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's Week 18 Instant Reaction. The regular season is all but in the books as we record. All that's left to decide is the AFC North champion and final playoff spot as the Steelers host the Ravens in what could prove to be the game of the week. This evening, we were treated to the first NFL Show live Red Zone watch-along with Connor, Brian and Shane coming to you live from Graco Studios in Dublin, with thanks to Freeform Media. This was the first of many live studio shows to come, and we look forward to continuing that partnership in the future. To look back on how this evening's action unfolded, I'm joined by Craig Rigdon. How are you doing, Craig?
Yeah, good. It's been an interesting week 18, I think. Probably more interesting than some people thought it might be.
Absolutely. And before we get to it, just on the live show, how good was it to tune into the lads earlier on? I was thinking before, when I heard about this gig, I was thinking a 3-hour live gig. It doesn't sound like an easy one to produce. I mean, there's a lot of work and preparation goes into that. But I have to say, from the minute I tuned in, it was so natural. It was so enjoyable to listen to. It was just back and forth, really, really natural. Just a bunch of football fans watching along. You felt like you were in the room along with the lads. So fair play to them. I thought they did a great job.
Yeah, funny enough, I had the Giants game in one ear with my wireless headphones, and I had my headphones over the top watching them from the studio, and it was a great little accompaniment to the rest of the games, and I'm sure, if people in the future want to do it that way, it's a great way to get both the game action and them at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you're listening along, you know, on a Sunday evening, you're watching along with Red Zone, and if you're on your own, it's exactly what you want. It's kind of like the pub talk or the pub banter that you want to get into, the kind of the arguments and debates and discussions. And they were very good, to include the live chat, the live comments. So very much an all inclusive for experience. And I'd very much recommend our listeners tune in to one of the many more live shows that we'll have as we continue that relationship. So look forward to it. But let's get into this evening's action. The early window didn't throw up a huge amount of surprise. The chips kind of fell as we expected, as did the late window in terms of seedings. However, the Bears and the Eagles, sorry, I'm stuttering as I go, but the Bears and Eagles, neither of them held up their end of the bargain, which resulted in the seeding staying the same. So the Bears have locked up the second seed by virtue of the fact that the Eagles didn't do their bit. Bears finishing out. Let's see the final score. I mean, they could not get anything going. Flat was the word used to describe them in the first half. Could not get anything going against the Lions. They went down 16-0. And then the Lions kind of fell asleep, let the Bears back into them, and you just thought, here we go again, the cardiac kids. Bears are going to pull it out. But the Lions end up coming away with a 19-16 win. If you're Ben Johnson and the Bears, and you've played as poorly as that for 3 quarters and almost pulled it out of the fire again, how are you supposed to feel as a Bears fan or a Bears part of that organization going into the playoffs next week?
Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal. Divisional matchups are weird and wonderful things, though. The rivalry takes on another level, and I think that a lot of players tend to elevate themselves when we get to these kind of matchups. We've seen it throughout the evening, to be fair, with a lot of these. And I don't think that the Bears fans should maybe be as upset as they might be. They didn't turn up for three quarters. It was pretty turgid across the board, with especially on offense, just really bad. But you just look at what they did in the fourth quarter. 2 touchdowns, 2-point conversions. Yes, they lose on a last-minute field goal, which is not ideal. But they've got Roma Dunze coming back. He looked healthy on the sideline, and I think that the biggest win that you can take out of this game from a Bears perspective is that, was there any massive injuries to any key offensive players? No. Yes, CJ Gardner-Johnson went down. We don't know how that's going to turn out. Hopefully he's okay, because you want all your best players in the playoffs. But from a Bears perspective, I think you have to take the fine margin wins for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right, because week 18 is such a strange week, because you have to have the you have to have those little permutations in the back of your head, no matter how much you want to go out and go all guns blazing to win a game. When you're already locked into the playoffs, there comes a point where the risk reward, it may change as the game progresses, and that kind of is a bit reflected by, in some part reflected by the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, this was not the Philadelphia Eagles starters. This was Tanner McKee leading the Eagles, and they clearly said to themselves, the win would be great, but it's not essential going into this. So that kind of tells me it didn't matter to them whether they played the Packers, the 49ers, or the Rams next week. What do you make of that Philadelphia Eagles mindset as a team that really haven't hit the peak of their form all season, but seem to be comfortable going into the playoffs, ready to take on all comers?
Yeah, I mean, they played a lot of their defensive starters. You do tend to rest the offense and keep the defense out there to kind of roll. And the defense wasn't amazing. Admittedly, the starters probably didn't play the normal snap counts that they would be. But you're right, offensively, they've stuttered through the season and they maybe could have done with having one of those kind of booster wins. Saquon Barkley hasn't done what Saquon's done in the past. Jalen Hurts has been up and down, but there was a clear emphasis of what they wanted to do today, which was, I guess, see what they had in Tanner McKee and then rest their starters. McKee, he threw 40 times, which is just an incredible number for a backup quarterback. And, they come away with the loss. And I think when you look at playoff seedings, I can understand some people going, oh, I'd rather play Team X or Team Y. But at the end of the day, you can only beat what's in front of you. And at some point, you're going to have to play against good teams to get to the big game. So I don't really think it matters in the terms of the seeding kind of things. You'd like to think that all the teams would fight to the end. But with the Eagles, they just obviously thought, right, let's just make sure we are healthy in the same way of as what I was saying with the Bears and just move on.
Yeah, seedings. Yeah, they might not matter in many regards, but there was definitely a big prize to be had in for the Rams in terms of winning the 5 seed, because I think very few would debate that a trip to Carolina was the best outcome they could have achieved after tonight's game. Early on in the game, I was taking notes, and I was typing to myself thinking to myself, sorry, what's wrong with the Rams? I mean, they were, early on, it was a distinct possibility that they could have limped into the playoffs on a 3-game losing streak. They did sort it out. I mean, they finished 37-20, and they came away with a convincing win against the Cardinals. As you called it the other night, a get-right game, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. I mean, Stafford finished with 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, but early doors, he could have had 2 or 3. There was a lot of wobbly passes, and there was a lot of, miscommunication in the red zone again, and I was thinking, where's they're really, really missing Devontae Adams here, but they're going to go into the playoffs again, full of confidence and full of belief that they can get over Carolina. The number 1 seed is wrapped up. I mean, there's not much to talk about there. It was really a formality that the Broncos were going to take down the 2nd seed Chargers. So I mean, there's no real surprises there. The Patriots now will host the Chargers. It's just going back to the Rams. How do you feel they're fixed going into the playoffs?
I actually think that this was that perfect get right game. However, I've got to give props to the Cardinals. I think that they actually went out there and performed well. We spoke about this earlier on in the week when we were on with Connor, and I said, and I think you said as well, that Brissett, Wilson, McBride were their kind of main difference makers. And you look at Brissett, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. One of those touchdowns is to Wilson, who got 99 yards, and McBride had 65 yards and could have had a touchdown himself. So that was their part of it. But yeah, this Rams team, they really turned up in that sort of latter half of the game, should we say. And really padded the score because they were behind to the Cardinals up until the 3rd quarter, and then they just flicked that switch, didn't they? I think one big thing for the Rams that they can maybe have a look at something as a big positive going into the postseason. Tyler Higbee, 91 yards, 1 touchdown, had 5 receptions, 18.2 yards of reception. I think that's a massive thing. Higbee's normally been quite solid, but he's kind of been a bit up and down, I think, this season. Um, and like having him back, like firing on all cylinders, will be very big for them because they've got Nakua, they've got Williams, they've got Terence Ferguson, their rookie tight end there, and then Devontae Adams coming back in. This is a team who have scored a hell of a lot of points this season, and hopefully are going to get hot at the right time.
Yeah, and when you see how heavy they lean on those three tight end sets, couple that with the production that they'll get from Devontae Adams returning, I think a lot of people may have cooled on him over the last couple of weeks, and a lot of the emphasis has rightly shifted to the Seahawks in that division. But we can't forget how dangerous a team the Rams are. Nothing really of note bar that in the later windows, the Vegas they kicked a 60-yard walk-off field goal to beat the Kansas City Chiefs on a night where I think they locked up the 1 seed. You're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this as well, Craig. So feel free to jump in if any of my stats are a little bit off. But into the early window, the big game was the big game that we were all looking forward to was the game that really neither team had anything to play for, but it was the implication of that game it was going to determine basically the champion of the NFC South. The Saints coming up short against the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons, to me, are probably the biggest what could have been team this season, maybe along with the Colts. And they finish 8-9, tied for the division lead, if you can believe it, after such a disappointing season. How would you feel if you're an Atlanta Falcons fan tonight, looking at what they managed to achieve on behalf of another team with the talent that they had on the field and absolutely nothing to play for?
I think defensively, there's a lot of pluses that you can look at for the Falcons. I think offensively, you've got to look at the fact that Kirk Cousins is the person who has taken you to a nice number of wins towards the back end of the season. And you're going to need to figure out what to do with him now. Are you going to trade him away? That contract's quite big. Are you all in on Penix and hoping that he comes back? So a lot of questions in this offseason. But I feel like the way that they finish probably saves Morris's job when it comes down to it. Yeah.
I should have mentioned at the top of that, by the way, the Falcons winning 19-17 in that game. On the Saints side of things, they've nothing to be ashamed of tonight, and I think they may have found their quarterback for the next couple of years in Tyler Shough. I mean, he had some huge moments in this game. He broke off a massive run at one point and a beautiful pass to Ronnie Bell, highlight reel one-handed touchdown grab, and we got a chance to see another onside kick from Charlie Smith. Unfortunately, he couldn't repeat the heroics from a few weeks back. But looking at the Panthers and the Bucks, I kind of feel like, do you think it's harsh of me to say that I think both teams have gotten what they deserved in terms of the Panthers playing a lot harder for their coach, for Dave Canales, and they've come away with some huge signature wins against the likes of the Rams, the likes of the Packers, when the Packers were seen to be a lot stronger team than they are perceived to be right now. And I've really played up and shown a huge amount of progress with Bryce Young, and they're the star young players like Tet McMillan versus the kind of the all-star roster that we expected to go places in the Bucks, and what they had with Baker Mayfield this year and just how they've limped to the finish line. They could have come away with a division win tonight, and it wouldn't have been on the back of anything that they did. Am I wrong to say both teams have got what they deserved here?
Yeah, I think so. I think there was a lot more expected of the Bucks, especially with their wide receiver core. I know that we were seeing Evans come back a little bit later, and obviously Godwin as well. And Evans missed a lot of time. The emergence of Emeka Ibuka, you kind of expected them to light things up, and it just never happened. They really did peter out towards the end, whereas the Panthers got stronger. You could argue that the benching and then subsequent re-inputting of Bryce Young at the end of last season has actually turned out to be a really good thing for the Panthers, and Bryce Young is looking better. I know there are still question marks around whether he's the future there, but it would be nice to see what they do and see if they can be that frisky team that we know that they can be at times, the Panthers, because they have knocked off some of the other seeded teams in those NFC playoffs.
Yeah, moving to the AFC then in the South, a game that our very own Kieran Boyle was in attendance for in Jacksonville, where the Jags knocked off the Titans and did it in style, 41-7. Titans looked like they might give the Jags some problems early on, and that all ended. And any hopes of an upset just disappeared when Cam Ward, unfortunately, had to go into the blue tent and subsequently headed into the locker room. So you'd hope that he's he'll get right, and he's a long off season to recover from that. But a lot of promise in what Cam Ward has produced at the tail end of the season. But the Jags are they're one of the hottest teams in football, if not the hottest team in football right now. Trevor Lawrence finished with a plum, 255 yards, 3 touchdowns. He hit 4,000 yards before safely exiting the field for a finish. They are absolutely sprinting to the finish line here.
Yeah, I haven't got a lot of notes on this one because it was so much of a blowout. But Trevor Lawrence has definitely got hot at the right time, as have the team. He's got 19 passing touchdowns and 5 rushing touchdowns in his last 8 games. There are only 2 other quarterbacks who have had a similar 8-game streak with 19 passing touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns. Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton, both of them won MVP that season as well. So are we looking at that dark horse? Could we see a few votes for Trevor Lawrence in the MVP race?
Yeah, you never know. I think it might be a little bit too late, but having said that, is it too easy to just say that it's Drake Mays to lose? And I don't know. It depends on what way the voters see it. But sticking with the South, the Colts really gave the Texans a good battle. It finished Texans won out 38-30. Riley Leonard really passed the eye test, I thought, in his real audition, NFL audition. He had a rushing touchdown and a couple of dimes, including a 66-yard touchdown pass on his very first pass of the game. I think it was to Alec Pierce. He had a poorly judged interception late in the game, but kept them in it and kept them fighting all the way through. CJ Stroud benching midway through the game, that kind of gave me again another example of the risk versus reward. I think once they saw that the division was out of reach, the extra seeding spot didn't seem like worth risking Stroud. So Davis Mills was tasked with finishing the game out and did so. Kaimi Fairbairn, with what we thought was the winning field goal until defensive tackle Tommy Togai put the icing on the cake. It was a defensive recovery while the Colts were playing a bit of pitch and toss. So always nice to see the big lads get into the end zone. So a fun finish to that game. Again, another what could have been story for the Colts. Such a disappointing end to the season. But look, the Texans, albeit not necessarily firing on all cylinders tonight, but they had one eye on the playoffs, one eye on their safety. Another team that's really, really hotting up at the right time.
Yeah, I suppose one cause for concern here is the fact that the Colts have just put 30 points up on your defense, a defense that hasn't conceded 30 points this year. I know, again, defensive starters were pulled at one moment, but you'd still hope that you could keep them to a lower end of the score. And it wasn't like they weren't doing it early. They had their starters in the Texans early, and the Colts were able to put points up against them. It started really well. 5 straight scoring drives to kick off this game. Just a real back and forth sort of ding dong of a match. Really, really impressive. But you've got to say, Riley Leonard maybe giving the Colts a little bit of a thought process to what to do at quarterback. Rumours that they want to get Daniel Jones back. Could they have Riley Leonard as the backup with a view to him taking over at some point? 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. He's the only Colts rookie quarterback to pass for 270, 2 touchdowns, 90 passer rating, along with Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning. So it's not bad company to start off your NFL career.
Yeah, just a point on the defense. I take your point that they gave up that 30 points tonight, but I think the mentality of a defense that's been so hungry and so aggressive, when you put that little caveat of, we need to win, but please don't put your bodies quite so much on the line as you usually do. I think that kind of changes the dynamic of how a defense like that can perform. So I'm going to give them a pass on that and say that they'll be ready next week. We can't let this this evening go by without acknowledging and celebrating, albeit a 17 game season. Connor did put his asterisk on this record, but Myles Garrett getting the sack record, getting to 23. And I did hear Connor, in fairness, he kind of went back on himself a little bit tonight, and he gave Myles Garrett credit. He has done it in fewer snaps than TJ Watt and Michael Strahan. So he's full of flowers for Myles Garrett tonight. One of the all-time great pass rushers. I mean, he's up there on the Mount Rushmore with the likes of Aaron Donald, with the likes of Lawrence Taylor. All these guys who just absolutely hunted quarterbacks. Might be questioned for his motives and whether he was genuine when he said all he wants to do was win before he got his bag. But you just can't deny the talent, and you can't deny the greatness of Myles Garrett tonight.
No, and it got to that point where you did wonder if it was ever going to happen, because he's been stuck on 20. What was it? He was stuck on 22 for quite some time, and you just wondered if it was going to happen. He said he had nightmares last night, about him not doing it, and he had to make sure that he put those to bed. But I'll leave you with a stat on that one that I saw, which I thought was absolutely incredible. Garrett leads the league in average get-off time from the ball snapping with 0.7 seconds. His get-off on the sack was 0.23 seconds, which means it's the fastest get-off on any sack this season. So did Joe Burrow give himself up? Yes. Did Myles Garrett come out like an absolute rocket after 0.23 seconds? Also, yes.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be too many complaints about this one. I don't think this had any bit of any shadow of a doubt as to whether he was getting to the quarterback by himself. But just before we leave that game, and before we leave this the instant reaction tonight, look, the Browns coming away with the 2017 win in what was an insignificant result really in the grand scheme of things. But just four people I want to mention to you. Okay, Zach Taylor, Kevin Stefanski, Joe Burrow, Shedeur Sanders. Out of the four of those names, who's still in situ for next season, if any of them? I'd be shocked if none of them are. But out of those four names, how many do you see staying in their current position? And that's with Shedeur Sanders as the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns.
I think Burrow and Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor is a coin flip for me, but I do think he stays. I think Joe Burrow will be there. I think the Chase Burrow connection, maybe we'll have some conversations over the off season. Stefanski, I think he could have saved himself here, but I think that maybe a parting of the ways might be best for all parties. Shedeur Sanders, I mean, who knows? Who knows? They still have Deshaun Watson under contract, so the Browns quarterback room could be anyone at this point.
Well, it's 1 a.m., Craig. We'll leave it there for now, but we'll be back with some more live reaction, Monday night, 9 p.m. tomorrow night. So do stay tuned on all our regular streaming platforms. Good night.